Week 12 preview with Biscuits and SEC alongside Hank. I am Stephen Willis, going to lead you through this magical mystery tour we call sports, and specifically SEC sports. We're going to look back at some of the games this past week. We're going to preview the games coming up this weekend. We hope we're your pregame show. We've done this all season, and we might hit a little bit of the coaching carousel as well. How you doing, Hank?
Doing great, Steven. Thanks for having me, as always. How are you doing? I know it was a big win for your team this weekend.
Yes, I'm pleasantly surprised. I've been waiting for the defense to perform like that, or at least get credit for performing like that. And basically, they played a game essentially of without fear of Zach Calzada throwing the football and just sold out to stop the run. Said, "Hey, Calzada, beat us," and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we can get right into it. I feel like I should be wearing some sort of Ole Miss gear. We didn't put anything on the game, but I feel bad showing up, without any repercussions because my Aggies just did not perform very well. And you got to get a ton of credit to the Ole Miss coaching staff, like you said. I mean, DJ Durkin and that defense came out with a pretty clear plan. They were selling out to stop the run. They did a very good job of that, especially in the first half. And yeah, I mean, Calzada, obviously the two picks were the backbreakers. Other than that, he didn't play necessarily a terrible game. And obviously, you can't say other than two picks, one of which was a pick six, he didn't play bad. That means he played pretty bad. But,
But
just again,
the
those
first one
picks came
wasn't really
late.
his fault. The first one wasn't his fault. That was Demas.
It was, yeah. I think, you look at that and sure the pass could have been lower, but you get two hands on it, you got to come up with it. I think it was just sort of really a perfect storm. I think the environment rattled them. We talked about it, that was their first real SEC road trip. The offensive line certainly did not seem to be in sync. I don't think they really knew how to handle the three-man front, something they struggled with against Arkansas earlier in the year. Um, and exactly, the plan worked. It was sell out to stop the run. The linebackers and safety and everybody was crashing downhill, and A&M couldn't take advantage. They were not able to get much going in the passing game. When they did, it was just sort of dink and dunk out routes or hitches and things that basically, I understand why they're doing it. You're taking what the defense gives you, but it's not going to make them stop doing anything. If you're not going to hit them over the top or hit them down the seam over the middle, then they're going to keep running downhill, which is exactly what they did. Obviously, as an A&M fan, the hardest part was weathering that storm, getting the game back to 15-13, and then it just all came crashing down because the Aggie defense gave up a ton of yards, but they were able to really get away with some fortunate circumstances. I think the fake field goal was an interesting call, but that's just lane, and you guys have seen it all year. So A&M's defense did not play great, but they came up with plays when they needed to, and they did everything they could do to win that game. When you're spotting the other team a safety, a pick six, and then a ball off an interception at like the 12-yard line, there's only so much they can do. So it was a tough loss for A&M, but certainly it's expected in the SEC. I mean, none of these games are gimmies, and Ole Miss earned it. They deserved to win. They were the better team. If A&M had somehow pulled it out, they would have felt like they stole one, and they would have. So really good win for Ole Miss, and hopefully they will carry that through the rest of the year and win out.
Yeah, and when you look back at this game and you're a Texas A&M fan, you need to really give props to that defense because if they didn't play as well as they did, that game could have been 30-0 at halftime and just on the way to complete old Big 12 style embarrassment. But those guys, the defensive line, Texas A&M's defense is as advertised. My concern for them was what were they going to do offensively. The benefit to Ole Miss's defense and having a weakness in the run game is where other people are going to try to attack you.
Right.
If it doesn't work, they're just out of ideas because the rest of the defense is solid. They tried a bunch of off-tackle plays, counters, and all that. I think CJ or Isaiah Spiller had 29 yards for the game, and by the time Jimbo figured out that Devin Achane was kind of going to unlock that defense a little bit, it was already too late.
Yeah, it was. That's certainly something when you look back at the box score and look at the game, you're like, man, how did Achane not get more touches? He was the one that had it that night. And at the end of the day, it's hard to really criticize. Obviously, Spiller's been a great back for years, so I don't fault Jimbo for continuing to give him the ball. But certainly that game, he didn't have his best night, and sort of just the way he runs, where he dances a little bit before he really gets north and south, wasn't a good plan because A&M was not blocking, and Ole Miss was sending guys from all different directions, and he would make one guy miss, and there'd be three more there waiting for him. Whereas A-Chain sort of is much more of like a one cut and just go, and he was able to move around much better. But it is what it is, and it was. I think again, it's all credit to Ole Miss's defense. The plan was clear from Jimbo and A&M, and it didn't work. And by the time they figured out how to adjust and how to attack it, it was just too little, too late.
All right, 29-19, Ole Miss a winner over Texas A&M. Let's move on to Georgia and Tennessee because this game was 41-17, but somehow it feels like Tennessee gave Georgia the best test of the year. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how you can piece that together, but here we are. Hendon Hooker is at least in the top three quarterbacks in the conference. Tennessee is going to be that team that is going to go to a bowl game at 7-5 and absolutely embarrass somebody and take 40,000 people there to do it.
Yeah, they will. I mean, there's a ton to be excited for in Rocky Top right now. The way this team is playing, what the Heupel offense has been able to do, how Hendon Hooker has looked. If you are looking ahead to a bowl game and maybe next year, Hooker technically has another year of eligibility. I think he's already at least a fifth-year senior, so he may not want to come back to college again, but it's possible. But back to the game, it was I mean it was something we've seen Georgia do over and over again. Where and here's something that needs to be pointed out as well: the Heupel game script or play script to start off these games is unbelievable. I mean, they score on their first drive every play, it seems like, and super quick. And they did it this week again. And I thought, I think last week I said that Tennessee would get to 21 in this game, which obviously they did not. And really, they weren't close. That last one was in total garbage time when the game was out of hand. But, Tennessee hung tough for a while. Thought their defensive line especially made some moves and was able to get in the backfield and just sort of disrupt that. It really, the Georgia offense really opened up, I think, when Stetson started keeping it a little bit and just getting, 5, 10, 15 yards when he needed to. And that kind of opened him up. But I think it's pretty clear. I mean, we've seen Tennessee's offense carve teams up all year. And aside from that first drive and garbage time, they weren't getting anything on Georgia. So another game where the first quarter and a half is pretty close, and then eventually the dam just breaks and you can't score on them. You can't run the ball, and they've got enough playmakers on offense that they're going to make plays at some point. And that's exactly what happened.
Yes, and I've done something the rest of college football has failed to do to this point, and that is figure out how to beat Georgia. The team that will beat Georgia will be the team that defensively holds Georgia to 14 points. Because if you're counting on them to their defense to hold Georgia to 21 or 24, the game is over. So the defense that can hold Georgia to 14 points will have a shot to beat them. And basically that is Alabama and maybe Ohio State, talent-wise. Mm-hmm. Although I do think Stetson Bennett is a trap. Georgia thinks they can go 12-0 and proceed to the playoff, which they can go 12-0 with Stetson Bennett. But the playoff is a different story. Once they get to Atlanta, that's a different story. And I think JT Daniels will be called upon. Maybe even a reverse 2017 maybe in the offering where JT comes in at halftime.
Yeah, totally possible. I mean, we saw it last year with Stetson in the Bama game, and there was a couple games, the Florida game, where he struggled a little bit, and the offense just wasn't clicking. We haven't really seen it this year. It also helps that no one's been able to score, so he hasn't even really been put into a position where the pressure's on past the first 15 minutes of the game or the first half. So we'll see. I think you're right, though. I think clearly they're going to go with Stetson until
Mhm.
they need to put JT in. However, I would imagine that leash is not super long. So if there does come a time when Kirby thinks we need to air it out here, or whatever the case may be, Stetson doesn't have it, he'll go to JT.
Yeah, just be careful that it's not a too little, too late type situation, and you get yourself in trouble. That's the reason I called him a trap. Okay, Auburn was up 28-3, had the game completely in hand, gave up 40 unanswered points. Auburn scored a garbage time touchdown and lost the game 43-34 to Mississippi State. Will Rogers, great game. You can see the air raid starting to take shape a little bit with what they're doing. And Mike Leach's offense, everywhere he's been, it takes 2 or 3 years, but once that gets there, they're going to be a handful.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you look at we just talked about how well Hendon Hooker's playing. I mean, it's hard to find a quarterback in the SEC, let alone or even in the country, playing better than Will Rogers right now. He has complete control of the offense. He's so good, and I noticed this a little bit in the A&M game, and we've talked plenty about that Mississippi State A&M game. But I felt like in that game, A&M was trying to rush three. They weren't able to get pressure, and then as soon as they would bring extra guys, Rogers was all over it. He knew where they were coming from. He knew his hot route, and he's only built on that. And we saw the same thing with Auburn. Auburn's pass rush was not able to get any pressure with three. Um, and if you can't do that, you're going to be in a tough spot because he knows the offense like the back of his hand by now.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he sees someone come or you show blitz pre-snap, he's ready and he knows exactly where he's going. And I mean, they're just gashing people. Now, how you give up a 28-3 lead is a little tough, even as high powered as that offense is and has been. Um, I don't really know. That one's a head scratcher. I mean, I guess Auburn, they weren't able to run the ball, they weren't able to kill the clock in that second half, and that's kind of the story of the game. Because Bo Nix, you look at it, I think he threw for like 350 yards or maybe a little bit more. So he had a good game. He
Played the
played
second half with a broken ankle.
Yeah, he played on a broken ankle.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't Auburn's offense that was the problem. It was just I don't think they really could run the ball, which hurt them in just the clock management when you have such a big lead. And then defensively, yeah, I mean, you just got to kind of shake your head and look at Derek Mason and be like, man, I don't know what that was, but we need to burn this tape because we just blew a 28-3 lead, and that can't happen at home to boot.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
that was tough. Auburn was riding high a couple weeks ago, and now they've dropped two straight. So it's just life in the SEC West. Every single game, especially this year, probably more so than in recent years, is going to be a dogfight because everybody's got talent, everybody's good, and I don't think there's really even Alabama obviously has fallen and played close games. There's not really a team that just goes out there and dominates. So it's tough. It's a tough division.
Yeah, most of the time you can say there is no Kansas in this league, but um, there could be there'll be a Texas soon enough.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
Arkansas a 16-13 overtime victory over LSU. LSU played pretty good defense. They struggled offensively. Arkansas got the field goal in overtime. They actually played for the field goal after getting an interception to start overtime. It was an ugly game. They were able to pull out the win. On to the next one, basically, which the next one's Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. I think look, they Arkansas is a very good story. I think they're sitting now at 7-3, which is phenomenal. And this game, it was really ugly. However, I don't want to say Arkansas was overlooking them because it was clear that it meant a lot. They wanted to win that boot trophy that I don't think they had won since 2016. Um, I just think, again, goes back to what I was just saying. Every team in the SEC West is pretty good this year, and going to Death Valley at night, as depleted as LSU is still a tough spot. And their offense didn't have much. I don't really know. I was surprised at that. I thought they would be able to score more, but at the end of the day, they figured it out. Their defense kept them in it, and they pulled it out in overtime. A tough win on the road, and like I said, they're sitting at 7-3. So I mean, if you told an Arkansas fan before the season that they'd be sitting here mid-November at 7-3 with games against Alabama and Missouri left, so very good chance to win 8, then they'll probably be super happy. So very good year for the Hogs. I don't know, we can talk more about the Bama game in a bit, but it was it was a good game, and again, I think LSU has every reason to quit and not play, but that's a couple weeks in a row where they've given their best effort. So whatever Edo's telling them, or probably more the assistants at this point, mainly Durante Jones, because the offense and Jake Peets has been very questionable. But defensively, they're playing. So it's just a good game, and a tough loss for LSU, who now has to win out to get to a bowl. So we'll see if they can do that.
Does A&M and LSU have a trophy that they play for?
No,
They do not.
no.
Because LSU is trophyless at this point because they've lost them all. They lost
Yeah.
the Magnolia Bowl. They lost the boot. They lost. They're going. I figure whenever Texas and Texas A&M comes back and that becomes the last game of the year again, I'm real curious. I bet they try to put Oklahoma and LSU together to play. So that's another manufactured rivalry that they have to deal with. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think something like that will happen because Missouri and Arkansas is not going away. The only geographic rival, the true rival that LSU has, is the LSU Ole Miss game, and that's something that goes back forever. But
Right.
you know, Ole Miss doesn't win enough for that to be an overly crazy rival. But when we win, you get a different reaction from LSU whenever they lose that game. And that just kind of proves how much it means to them deep down. They like to pretend like we're not rivals, but then all of a sudden, like in 2014, they beat Ole Miss 10-7 and stormed the field. Yeah, that was because the year before we beat them. The year after, yeah, it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Let's see the friends and family games. Okay. Kentucky a 34-17 win. This game looks like Kentucky got up 31-3, pulled the starters out, and just shut it down. Arkansas or Vanderbilt got some garbage time touchdowns, but that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, we don't need to spend a ton of time on
Yeah.
this. Like you said, it was 31-3 at the half. Kentucky, good for them. They were on a losing skid there, so it was good to get back in the winner circle. It's always nice when you're coming off a tough stretch and losing a couple games and you see Vandy pop up on your schedule, because it's at this point nearly a guaranteed win, especially for a team of Kentucky's caliber. So they took care of business, got back on track, and yeah, just a good win. Vandy, there's not much to say at this point. They are what they are, and that rebuild is going to take a long time if it ever happens.
Yeah. The other friends and family game of the weekend is Missouri beat South Carolina. South Carolina got all kinds of credit for beating Florida, but we'll get to Florida in just a second. It turns out that may have not been as deserved as we were thinking. It's like maybe South Carolina figured some stuff out. No, they didn't. Florida's just terrible. But Missouri was able to get the win. Tyler Beatty went over 200 yards. I think the third time this year over 200 yards. Good win for the Tigers. It's their 5th win. If they can somehow get to 6, and they've got Florida this week, it's a bowl game up in Columbia, Missouri. And who would have thought that?
Yeah, exactly. That was a must win for the Tigers to get bowl eligible, and they came out and played like it. They had a pretty good lead. I think it was 31-14 before South Carolina scored a couple late touchdowns. This was a good, entertaining game. but really, both of these teams are struggling. Now, if they can get to a bowl, that would be a huge, huge victory for either team based on their personnel and kind of the shortcomings they've had this year. But it was good to see Missouri kind of get back into it. I think I got a little bit too bought into South Carolina after their Florida win. I thought they would go on the road and win. And I think what we saw is they're just not that team yet. They are not
No.
built to do that. They can't go on the road. And when you go up against basically Tyler Beatty, he's tough to stop. So he's making a push for first team All SEC. I don't know if they'll give it to a kid from Missouri whose team's not very good, but statistically, he's been the most impressive back in the SEC all season.
Yeah, if he gets a win against the Gators this weekend, I think there's a chance of that happening because that game I believe is in Columbia as well. We'll get to that in just a second. Speaking of the Florida Gators, normally we wouldn't even talk about this, but 70-52 winners over the Samford Bulldogs of 4-5 FCS fame. Chris Hatcher, offensive coordinator, they run the air raid. He's a Mike Leach disciple. Still, 52 points is the most ever scored against an SEC team by an FCS opponent. There's major, major problems in Gainesville right now.
There is, and at this point, there's almost nothing to say. I think I tweeted at some point on Saturday asking the question: is Dan Mullen is he actively trying to get fired? Because the way this team has been playing and the things that he has been saying in the media make no sense for a guy who actually cares about his job and wants to keep it. Nothing he's saying or doing makes any sense. I really don't know what to say. It honestly, to me, just looks like a team that is totally given up. And this will be, I guess, the second year in a row that they've kind of given up. Now, last year was only for the bowl game that they did that, but still, you can just sort of see that when you talk about culture and things like that are really sort of the building blocks of a program, they don't have it, and doesn't look like they care. And I mean, I don't want to clown on these kids for celebrating after the game, but all I will say is you would never see a program like Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, A&M, LSU, Georgia, any team in the SEC that people respect and has a good culture, they would not be dancing around the locker room after giving up 52 points at home to a FCS team with a losing record. I mean, none of it makes sense. And again, I get it. Celebrate, you win, and it feels good. But man, again, that's just something that doesn't make sense for a guy that looks like he cares.
Two SEC Big 12 matchups that I'm just dying to see is I want to see Florida play Texas because that game could be 80-80. Mm-hmm. And I want to see Kansas play Vanderbilt. Give me both of those matchups, and I would be pretty happy. Let's move on to this week. Georgia, Charleston Southern's playing this weekend. Kentucky, New Mexico State, Tennessee State, Mississippi State. A&M is playing Prairie View A&M, and I believe that is it for the gimme games. Basically, it is that weekend. So we'll start off with Arkansas and Alabama. I believe that game, is that in Tuscaloosa? Looks like it's in Tuscaloosa. And this is a game that Alabama can clinch the West with a win. So there is a little bit to play for, although they would like to do that to Auburn, but they'd probably not like to go to Auburn with anything on the line because that Auburn voodoo down there is kind of just a weird, weird thing. Bryce Young has a chance to really put a stranglehold on the Heisman playing against a ranked team. Arkansas's drop 8 gives people problems, but expect Alabama to play murder ball like 2011, 2012 style Alabama offense, just like they did against Ole Miss, and that's their answer to this defense.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. Now, obviously, Alabama needs this one, and I think they need to play well with the matchup in Jordan-Hare looming. With Bo Nix going down, that game lost a bit of its luster, but TJ Finley's a capable backup, so we can talk more about that when the time comes. However, um, it's funny. It's this year's been full of chaos, and I'm still not totally sold on Alabama. I just think in this spot with everything on the line, I expect them to come out and play pretty well. It's hard to take much from a game against New Mexico State like they played last week, but that game was 49-3 at the half. So, they played well, all things considered, and I think they will play well against Arkansas. I worry about the Arkansas secondary getting beat on a couple big plays. Jamison Williams, in particular, has been very good on big explosive plays, and I just think it's a pretty bad matchup for Arkansas. Um, we'll see. I think the wild card here is kind of the Alabama defense because we've seen them give up a little bit more than we're used to seeing this year. Um, I just don't know. Other than Traylon Burks, I don't really know what Arkansas can do through the passing game. Now, their running game, if they're able to run the ball, they'll be in this one. Obviously, they really struggled to run it against LSU a week ago. So, um, who knows what that'll look like. But KJ Jefferson will give them a fighting chance in the pocket. I think Bama, especially with Will Anderson, the way he's playing, will be able to get pressure on him. But he's got some legs and some mobility to move around. So I think they'll be able to score some. I think right now Bama is again that they know what's in front of them, and although they are not a vintage Bama team, they're still better than Arkansas. They have more talent, and I think they'll be able to get this one done. Probably, it'll be a close game, at half, and I think Bama pulls away. Maybe almost similar to kind of how the way the Tennessee game went, where they're going back and forth. It's a close game in the third quarter, maybe bleeds into the fourth, but eventually Bama will get over the top a few times and pull it out.
Key to this game, if you're watching it, just looking at it, Arkansas and the RPO game and making Henry To'oTo'o respect that RPO game because you can get him turned around. If he gets turned around, Arkansas's offense will have some success. If they don't do that and just let him attack the running backs, they're just going to shut Arkansas down. So that's one thing to look at. Florida and Missouri in Columbia. Florida, an 8.5-point favorite. It's the friends and family game on SEC Network. It's a game that only a mother could love. And, you're dealing with Emory Jones or AR-15. I don't guess it matters against Tyler Beatty, Connor Bazelak, and the boys. I don't know about this game. If Florida's defense that happened last week shows up this week, Missouri could be wildly effective. And they only gave up 28 points defensively. I don't know.
Yeah, this one obviously very tough to predict just because Florida is such a wild card. But I'm gonna lean. I will say this: Kentucky, or sorry, not Kentucky, Missouri. I think will definitely cover. I think this will be a close game, and I'm gonna pick them to win based on the fact that I think that team still cares. They want to get to a bowl game. They will play hard. Tyler Beatty will play hard, and I'm just not convinced anyone on Florida's defense cares, especially cares enough to try to tackle Beatty. I think they'll be able to run the ball. Bazelak has been pretty underwhelming this year overall, but we know he's capable. So again, playing a home game, maybe he can clean things up a little bit and cut down on the turnovers. But I really have lost all faith in Florida, especially going on the road. So I really don't think that they are going to play very well. I think, Emory Jones clearly is playing hard, and, he had a big game against Sanford, I guess, and put up good numbers. Um, but I don't think that they care. And we have seen a slight improvement from Missouri's defense. They did all right against Georgia, all things considered, and then
Yeah.
last week, like you said, only gave up 28 points. So I don't think they've turned a corner. I don't think they're a good defense, but I think they can hold Florida to high 20s, maybe mid 30s in points. And if that's the case, I think Mizzou can put up 35 or 40 on them because we've seen nothing from Florida's defense over the last month to convince you otherwise.
Yeah, the thing you need to look at in this game is Florida's ability to be explosive. If it's taken away and you force them to grind it out and drive the football, I don't know if Florida can go 10 plays without self destructing. If that happens, I like Mizzou in this game. If Florida can be explosive in the quarterback run game, especially, look for the Gators to win this game. Auburn is 6-4. South Carolina 5-5. Auburn's a 7.5 point favorite. It's 6 o'clock game on ESPN. Auburn and South Carolina. Auburn, this is after what had just happened to Auburn to drop that game, and not just drop that game, but lose your quarterback and lose your kicker, and all these things just compounding one on top of the other on top of the other. If it was anybody else but South Carolina, I think Auburn would be in trouble. But this game is going to be a game in Columbia that they have to run the football. I think TJ Finley will make some plays, but there's a reason he's the backup quarterback. And South Carolina can play a little bit of defense, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'll say this. With a bowl berth potentially on the line, it's certainly possible that South Carolina could sneak up and get them. We know, obviously, South Carolina finishes the year with Clemson. Clemson has been playing better football, and their defense is still very good. So that game is still a very big long shot for South Carolina. So they have to look at this game and be thinking, this is our shot. So I think they're going to come out firing, but I don't think they quite have it. Now, obviously, without Bo Nix, we'll see what Auburn can do, and that was obviously a gut wrenching loss a week ago. But I do think that Auburn, we've seen throughout the year that they've been a pretty mentally tough team, I think, and they've come back for some tough losses. That lost to Penn State, and they rallied after that to go on the road at LSU. So I think they'll win. Tank Bigsby, Jarquez Hunter will need to have a big game. But really, I think the matchup here is Auburn's defense, who has been playing well with the exception of last weekend, obviously. However, South Carolina does not run anything near what Mississippi State does. And Jason Brown, their FCS transfer, came back down to earth a little bit against Missouri. So I think Auburn will be able to handle the South Carolina offense. I don't envision Auburn really pulling away necessarily and just, pounding South Carolina, but I think, they'll just sort of outlast them and will end up, they'll win the game by 10 or 14 points and get a much needed road victory before they go to Alabama. But I think, it'll probably be 31-21, 31-24 type of game where it's relatively close, but, not in doubt in the final minutes.
If Auburn finds a way to drop this game, they're not getting next week. They're going to close at 6-6, and they are Birmingham bound, baby. South Alabama and Tennessee. Tennessee a 28-point favorite. The over/under is 62. I'm betting Josh Heupel scores within the first 3 plays of the game. It is the ESPNU game at 6:30 on Saturday. I like the Vols. This is the game they get bowl eligible. They haven't even played Vandy yet, but Tennessee is the team that's going to be 7-5 and give somebody in a bowl game just embarrass their ass.
Yeah, totally agree. They will play well in this game. I mean, they are one of those teams that, like you said, they're hot at the right time. And if you look back, even just the earlier games on their schedule, mainly the Pitt game, even Florida is a bit of a head scratcher, but that was obviously a different Florida team. However, I think if Hendon Hooker is in, especially that Pitt game, they probably win. So there's some stuff that they left out there, and I think closing the season with South Alabama and Vandy is exactly what they need. They've had a tough schedule. They, they'll be fine. They'll win this game pretty easily. Probably score 40 plus points and cruise to a victory.
All right, Louisiana Monroe at LSU. LSU a 29-point favorite. It's at 8 o'clock on ESPN2. Good grief. It's almost like they're out of content or something on ESPN2. But this is a game. LSU's offense struggles scoring the ball. Rich Rod can manufacture points from time to time and has against the LSU defense. I am interested to see what happens. Does LSU essentially quit after what happened last week, or does Coach Orgeron not really allow that to happen?
We'll see. I've been waiting on them to quit now for a couple weeks, and they haven't quite done it. So I think what we're seeing here is the LSU defense likes Durante Jones, and they're playing for him. And he's come out 2 weeks in a row with a pretty good plan. So I don't think UL Monroe will be able to score very much. They have been a lot better than I thought they were going to be. They were just god awful last year.
Mm-hmm.
But Terry Bowden's somewhat got them going in the right direction. I just don't see them pulling this one out. The LSU has to win out to go to a bowl. I think again, the way we've seen them at least try hard and they're giving effort out there as limited as they are. So this is a must-win game, and I think they'll win it. Especially, again, what we said about Arkansas, it's a tough place to play at night. LSU somehow has another night game. They get another one the following week when A&M comes to town. So they'll win this game at home. I don't think they're going to score very much because they don't really have a quarterback right now. I heard that they're going to go back to Max Johnson, which I guess is fine. I mean, I don't know. That whole situation confuses me because and really until the Alabama game, I didn't think that Max Johnson was the problem. And then he had a pretty bad one there and didn't start well against Arkansas. But Nussmeier came in and he didn't really look that good either. So
Yeah, he
I don't
looked
know
like a
what
true
they're doing.
freshman. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's bizarre.
Yeah, very bizarre. I know there's some stuff potentially burning his red shirt. Do they want to? Do they not? So we'll see. But I think they should be able to run the ball. Ty Davis Price has been running pretty well, and they'll pull this one out. Maybe a 24-10 type of game. I don't see them scoring a ton, but I think their defense is pretty salty at the moment.
Yeah, and that's way, way too many points. This is the point where
Yeah,
31-3 does not cover. So
yeah.
that's way too many points. Ole Miss and Vanderbilt on the SEC network at 6:30 on Saturday. Ole Miss a 36.5-point favorite. Honestly, if they wanted to play everybody, Ole Miss could score 75, 80 points in this game. But with the Egg Bowl just 5 days away, they're probably going to want to get people out of the game as quickly as possible. So there's your little secret. Take Vanderbilt in the points. Ole Miss is probably going to win this game 31-10, walk out of there and get ready for the Egg Bowl.
Completely agree. I think this could play out a lot like the Liberty game, except for the fact that Vanderbilt doesn't have the offensive firepower that Liberty does. So we'll
That's a
probably
sad
not
statement.
yeah, they will probably not get to what it was 14 points that Liberty managed. But I think you're right. I think you're going to see Ole Miss come out. They're going to start fast, score 21, 24 points pretty early, and then sort of pull back. And maybe even if they don't end up sitting guys super early, I think that they'll get a lot more conservative with the play calls and just try to bleed that clock. It was encouraging, obviously, if you're an Ole Miss fan. The team looked a lot healthier last week. Corral, he wasn't limping. They didn't really call his number very often in the run game. So I'm sure there's a little something there that they were worried about. But, when he was able to run and took it himself, he looked pretty much fine. And then, who was it? Sanders and
Drummond.
Drummond were both back. Again, I don't know if they were 100%, but they were out there. They made a couple catches against A&M. So they're getting healthier. And like you said, the big matchup is the Mississippi State game in the Egg Bowl. So I think they're going to come out full strength, score a couple touchdowns, and then kind of let their foot
Yeah,
off the gas and just coast.
yeah, that is what I expect as well. Looking at the coaching carousel, what are you hearing? Are you hearing anything on the LSU search? What's going on with the coaching carousel right now?
Well, the latest stuff I'm sure you saw today was that Lincoln Riley has all of a sudden become the leader in the clubhouse at LSU.
Yeah, I heard $12 million.
That blows my mind. So I said all along, when of course Jimbo was linked to this job very early on, and I said the only way that he would take that currently is if they were to offer him, 12 million or 11 million or something, because he's already getting paid 9 and whatever, and he's got a 10-year deal, all guaranteed. He's got
Yeah, he's not
basically
walking away
everything
from that.
yeah. So that was my thought is they're going to have to offer him over 100 million guaranteed, and at 11 or 12 million a year, which I don't know, as an athletic director, how you justify paying someone more than Alabama is paying Nick Saban, um, because no one is as good as Nick Saban. So I mean, look, if they want to throw that much money at Lincoln, I honestly would say good luck. Not that it wouldn't work. I think Lincoln's a good coach, and I think that's probably what it would take to get him out of Oklahoma, because he's been there for a while now. That's a very steady program. You look at their coaching history, and other than a blip after Switzer left, they've been pretty solid and steady. So if you're a college coach and you want like a nice, uh, obviously you have to win, but the fan base seemingly is pretty understanding, and you can have a comfortable life there. Whereas LSU, they just fired a guy that won a national championship in 2019.
Less than two
So
years ago. Yeah.
right, so it's a little bit different of a beast, I think, in Baton Rouge, which is why I think it would take that kind of money to get him out of there. I just don't
Look,
know. I really don't know how to get a read on it. It's possible that he could take it. I still think Mel Tucker makes a lot of sense. I even think Billy Napier makes a lot of sense. Now,
yeah.
that's not Scott Woodward's sort of MO. He's obviously hired big name coaches, and he's the big game hunter or whatever they're calling him. So, maybe he wouldn't do it, but I don't think Napier would be a bad hire at all.
Yeah.
But
People, we need to remember that Oklahoma this year is like Charmin extra soft. That's one of the softest football teams I have ever seen. Now they physically dominated Texas. That's another problem they have, and both of those coming into this league. Ooh, I bet. I mean, like Vanderbilt's like, come on.
yeah, and maybe that plays into it. Maybe that's why Lincoln would consider it, just because he does know the difference in the physicality level. He's played SEC teams in the playoff, and outside of the 2017 Baker versus Nick Chubb and Sony Michel game, they've gotten whooped, and obviously they didn't win that game either, but at least it was close. So he knows what these teams look like, and he knows Oklahoma is not that at the moment. So he's either got to make the roster transformation on the fly and do that while he's in the SEC, which probably means losing several games every year, which they have not done at Oklahoma historically in his tenure. Or he could hop over to LSU, make a ton of money, and most likely just have a leg up in that arms race, because the guys are there at LSU for the most part, and you've got a defense that is nasty. And so maybe that's why he would take it. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Texas is a whole different story. They're not even in the same league as Oklahoma, and whenever they come into the SEC, they better hope it's not next year or 2023, because it could get ugly. But even Oklahoma, I think, will be in for a bit of a rude awakening their first couple years if they don't toughen up and get some bigger guys on the line of scrimmage, because they're going to get beat up.
Yeah, A&M came into the league kind of the same thing. They came in as Charmin extra soft as well. They had Johnny Manziel and everything to kind of mask what was going on, but they were soft in the trenches, and it took 10 years for them to do it, but they just started pounding on defensive linemen and offensive linemen and remaking their team. And now they're an SEC team. They're absolutely an SEC team as far as the lines go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the crazy thing, right? Is I tell I live in Texas, so I'm around plenty of Longhorn and Sooner folks, and I try to tell them, look, when we came into the SEC, we had the Heisman Trophy winner, and he played 2 seasons. We still lost. It was 2 games in the SEC his Heisman year, and then the following year, I think we lost. I think we lost 4 games. I know we lost 4 on the year. I don't remember if one was out of conference, but so you're saying you go into this conference with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. He plays 2 years, and you still lose 6 conference games in 2 years,
Yeah,
and
best
that's the
player I've ever
reality.
seen in person, by the way, Johnny
Yeah,
Manziel. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like exactly what you said. The team overall was not built for the SEC. They got lucky that they had a Heisman Trophy winner on the roster that propped them up and won them games. But if again, if you want to come into the league and you don't have a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, then how many games are you going to lose? Because we lost 6, so you're looking at more than that,
Yeah.
which neither one of those schools would be happy with. And yeah, it takes time, and you nailed it. I mean, the whole Sumlin tenure was skill position, kind of a lot of flash, but couldn't stop the run, struggled to run the ball, and he got fired. So that's where that got him.
Yeah. And like I said, you got the Jimbo. You gave him $100 million. He built your line up. And like I said, their defensive line, they're the second best defensive line in the conference, and the best Ole Miss we'll see for sure. But those guys are better than Alabama, and that's saying something. That's the reason you guys were able to beat Alabama is because those guys are better than Alabama's defensive line.
Yeah, 100%. We've done sort of a 180 where now we are very, very good on the line of scrimmage, and our offense struggles in the skill department in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, and breaking things open. But it's a constant building process, and yeah, I mean, just to go back to that coaching carousel stuff, I think if Lincoln were to take the LSU job, the storylines would be crazy because obviously Oklahoma's coming in. So the dominoes that would fall from there um, would be monumental, especially obviously with the Oklahoma job then opening up, which I believe would trump, USC and become the marquee job on the market. So a, a lot of interesting stuff going on. Florida possibly will open up. Washington just opened up, so there's a lot going on in the coaching world.
We talk about James Franklin to USC, but James Franklin to Oklahoma, that could be pretty fun.
Yeah, I think he would fit in well there too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because he's been in this league before. Like he won 9 games twice at Vanderbilt. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, hey,
yeah,
Oklahoma could do a lot worse
yeah.
with replacing Lincoln than James Franklin.
The one thing James Franklin needs to do, he needs to get away from basically being a CEO coach and go back to implementing his offense, doing the Ralph Friedgen stuff that got him respect at the Vanderbilt level. And then when he got to Penn State, he kind of backed off a little bit. He needs to take that back over. But Hank, man, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. This has been the SEC Week 12 preview with Biscuits and SEC. Tune in next week. It'll be our last week to do it this season.
Man,
Well, we might get together for the conference championship game, but yeah, we'll see what's up about that. But thank you very much, Hank.
yep. Thanks for having me.